Hello, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. This is Mark and Heidi. We're coming to you from the Wisdom Factory in Umbria, Italy. We do these shows every Friday, and we bring you people who have special things, special talents, special skills, special knowledge that they want to share with the world. And they can reach almost any aspect of life, but we try to stick to the more important stuff. And one of the important things we're sticking to tonight is music. All right. We have gone through now a couple seasons, and we're sort of in between our seasons right now, so we have a place where we can fit in this special program about a very special musician with what should I say? I want to say extreme talents, but somehow extreme brings up ideas of, muscular athletes and so forth.
And who is she?
Who is she?
She is Jessica Roemischer. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Jessica. Right.
Jessica is a classical pianist, and she has really found her unique style in playing music and in performing music, and she has also explored in depth how to inspire people and to empower people by playing and also playing together with them, and hence our title today. I sometimes speak German in between. Title is German. So our title today is The Duet Paradigm, a portal to innocence, wonder, and relatedness.
Yes.
Okay, we are doing here a little bit funny, but I think it's a very serious topic, and we will explore it together with Jessica. Jessica, there is a famous person whose name is Greg Thomas, and he's a writer at the New York Daily News.
Music critic.
Yeah. He says about her, Jessica's performances are a musical meditation that evoke peace because they come from love.
Yeah.
And we know in this direct way Jessica only for a few days, let's say, while we follow her for a long time, but I really can agree what this person says about you. I feel your love emanating, Jessica. It's really wonderful. And you were also nominated for the CNN Heroes Award for your groundbreaking work. And apart from being a musician, you are also a writer, and your newest book is called In Duet with God, the story of a lifelong friendship. And this book is available at www.induetwithgod.com.
And I think this would be a good time for Jessica to hold up that book so people can see the cover.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There we go. In Duet with God.
And I am sure we will talk a little bit about this book later. Okay.
Wonderful.
And you can contact Jessica, as you see here, with www.pianobeautiful.com, and you can go also to her video YouTube channel and hear some of her performances.
Yeah.
So this is the introduction. Did we say anything about us? No.
No, we didn't.
Okay, it's not
Who
so
are
important.
That's Heidi. I'm Mark. Okay.
Okay.
That's all you need to know.
Okay, we are back here.
Yeah.
We are going directly into the conversation of today, the duet paradigm. I mean, I should say, I do a lot of things, but before I did, for instance, the Hangout host and transformational coaching and all this stuff, I was a classical singer, and so a little bit of music was my background too. And this is so exciting for me to finally talk with a musician who is and has an integral background, as we want to promote the integral world view with our Wisdom Factory sessions.
Well, I think probably that a lot of people who are watching really don't know anything about integral. So rest assured, you don't need to know anything about it.
No, but if you want to, we have a lot of introductory videos on our Wisdom Factory YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So you can go there. So let's go.
Yeah. And I really did hear about Jessica first. Oh my goodness, it was 10 years ago. And there was an interview with Don Beck of Spiral Dynamics, and it's become a classic interview actually over the years. And I remember it vividly to this day, and it moved me into that study many years ago, and I'm grateful for that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. This is great. So
That's
you have
very good.
Have touched his life long before I knew you.
Before I knew anything about your music. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Well, you know, it reminds me, and I think that the experience that I've had with, for people who don't know who Dr. Don Beck is, he's a cultural theorist and activist, and he worked for many years in South Africa during the years of apartheid when things were very, very hard there. And I had the great joy and blessing to begin to understand the unique perspective that he has. Now, I guess to begin to speak about, and you know, as we were talking earlier, and by the way, you guys are a great duet.
We are not playing, but we are chatting in a duet.
Not everybody is, you know.
Yes, that's true.
But I have to say that too, you know, when we were just preparing for this talk a few minutes ago, and I had mentioned that when I was thinking about what we would discuss today, or what I was thinking about discussing today with you, and I just want to thank you for this great opportunity, because it's not every day that such a wonderful forum comes along to say, here, you know, let's do this. And I know I wrote to Mark, actually. This is just a little bit of a funny thing, because I know that I wrote to Mark and said, after I found out about you and the wonderful work that you're doing and the people that you're presenting, like Elsa Malouf and Saeed Dalabani, people who are doing wonderful work, I thought, heck, I'll just write and see if you want to do an interview. And one of the reasons that I don't feel that self-conscious in writing, and Mark had such a gracious response. He said, oh, of course, this is terrific. I remember your article, etc. But, you know, my background is, I was born into a Jewish, a secular Jewish family. And one of the wonderful benefits of that, and sometimes it really can take you a long time to look back on your own life and appreciate the gifts that you've been given. And one of the gifts that I've most certainly been given is the lack of fear, and this comes directly from my mom, is a lack of fear in pestering people. So I didn't really feel, and of course Mark made it very easy from the outset, because I didn't feel like I had to pursue the pestering very far. So anyway, I'm grateful to be with you, and your response, which was so immediate and, you know, and genuine, and opens up this whole opportunity to talk. So yeah, I wanted to thank you, just to start by thanking you and everybody who's tuning in and will tune in to the replay and all of that. I mean, I just think this is just terrific and a wonderful product of our modern life.
Yeah.
Actually, it is. And since I got to know the Google Hangouts, which are free, so we can really, without any budget, we can come out and do this work. And we are both in a certain age where we are not so much anymore interested in doing a big career. I mean, I have given up to want to be a grand opera singer, you know. So we can get.
But she hasn't given up the voice, which is nice.
Yeah, but to go out and give the people the possibility to be shown, and having overcome their own tendency to invisibility. All my singing career was holding back, you know. If I had had this courage to really present myself and sell myself in a certain way as I have it today, I think I would have done a much more career than I have done, actually, because I was always about somebody has to discover me. And so somehow we came into the role of, I don't want to say discover, because you are not to be discovered, you are already very much out, but some other people are. And this is also offered to people who are working in this field of integral consciousness, let's say, and to get a platform to make themselves known. This was our originally intent. And when there are some famous people coming in, we are really happy.
Great, wonderful. Yeah. Somebody's noticing us.
Well, and it is far and wide, absolutely. You know, but what you said, Heidi, I have to say, I would like to comment on it and appreciate your sharing the experience that you had in music. Because when I perform, and what I've seen over all of these years of teaching, is that people who have studied music, whether it's voice as you have, or an instrument, you know, such as piano, there's a kind of, I'm going to use the word bracketing that happens. And I think it was either Duke Ellington or Louis Armstrong said about music, if it sounds good, it is good. Now, if you really take that to heart, it opens up enormous possibilities. And when I hear your story and the fact that there must have been something that drew you into singing, that inspired you to begin to sing, and that impulse is still there, alive. There's no question about it. So, yeah.
It is what you say. For me, the main research is the sound, and not necessarily the performance of, you know, coloratura or whatever it is, but to have a voice which sounds good. And so it's really, I'm amazed that you are saying that. This is what I teach and taught. It's the research of the voice which sounds good, and to show people that they have a voice which sounds good. And if it doesn't sound good at the moment, it's not because they don't have it, but because they don't have developed their full potential. And every voice which has developed the full potential sounds good.
And not necessarily while singing, just a good voice, you know.
You know, I had a really life-changing experience around this topic. And the video of this moment is actually on the homepage of my website at pianobeautiful.com. So you can actually watch what I'm about to describe. So I was sitting in a cafe where I actually have played for almost the last 10 years every Saturday here in Lenox, Massachusetts. And I do this interesting modality, musical modality, where I'll sit with people in duet at the piano and I'll give them the opportunity to just improvise. And the nomination for the CNN Heroes Award was around the work specifically with people with disabilities such as Down syndrome, blindness, autism, etc. So at the beginning of this conversation today, when I talked about, you know, this sense of fluidity, I think I'd mentioned that earlier, or if it was before in our pre-conversation, it was because of this experience. So I was sitting with a girl, she was 15 at the time, named Hope. It's a perfect name. And she has Down syndrome, although she likes to say that she has up syndrome. And she was improvising with me, and I was sitting in the bass and she was in the treble, and the music that came out of her was completely her own music. I was at the service of her music making. What happened there was of such an extraordinary quality. that it redefined my sense of almost every aspect of how we define the human condition, human, what we would call limitation, music teaching, music performance, and the whole nature of our aesthetic sense. Mm-hmm. Because she came forth with music that by any measure was extraordinary. And at the very end, when you watch this, you see her in service of what she had just created. It's beyond belief. So I can no longer think of traditional music training in the same terms that I used to. Mm-hmm. Because when someone sits down at the piano, and I even recently did this with a man who was 95, he had never played before. In 95 years, that's a long life. That's almost as long as most people on this earth live at this time, okay? Not a whole lot longer. And he'd never played, ever sat down at the piano, and the music that came out of him was incredible. He had the best rhythm you'd ever want. So it kind of puts everything into question.
Yeah, I can agree with that. We saw this little video, and I so loved it when your eyes met in the middle, and even at the end, this wonder. And we come back here to our title. She was wondering, and you were so, accommodating and happy too. It is really worthwhile watching this video. And I so agree what you say, that we need to find another way to approach music as a part of life, and not something for specialists who do it in a perfect way, because otherwise music won't survive, in my idea. Or it becomes so schematic as, loops. You do only, there is now a website out where people can make loops of 3 or 4 takt, what is it, batuta? Measures, yeah, and then you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. I don't think this is at the end really what we intend, what music is. We intend that music is an expression of our inner state. And I think I have understood you right in that way. And for me, it is. It has become. It was not at the beginning. At the beginning was the perfect performance, and don't make any error because, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Heidi, I'll never forget when I was in high school, I was doing a lot of competing. I'm classically trained, so I appreciate what you're saying. And I was doing a lot of competing, and I actually had gone through several of the most important competitions in my senior year of high school, and I'd done well, and it was sort of like something in me completely let go. And I went into this sort of final competition. I was playing a Mozart concerto in the second movement. Mozart is one of the hardest composers to play because he's so exposed. He will create a melody that's just a single line of notes, and there's no camouflage, and there's no place to hide. You're either going to play it like there's no tomorrow, or you're not. And every note has to unfold like it's never been played before. That's a true performance, right? Is when you feel that music is being created in front of you and has never before really been played in the way that you're hearing it. So the thing about it is that I think I just completely let go, and the notes that came out were completely not the right ones. And my teacher looked at me and she said, "Jess, I think you just rewrote Mozart."
Wonderful.
And
wonderful.
I appreciated the fact that she was so open about it, because I've been rewriting Mozart ever since, and pretty much everybody else. But it's the reason I didn't end up going to Juilliard. I probably could have gone to Juilliard, for example, which is one of the most famous music schools, and it's in New York where I was growing up and so on. And I just decided, I don't know why. I think when you're young or when you're old, if you don't necessarily know why things are happening the way they are, or the choices that you're making, but then you look back and you realize, oh my gosh, there was this deeper intelligence at work. And I think there was a deeper intelligence at work in the fact that I decided I wasn't going to end up going to music school. So there was a freedom that was allowed, and that freedom kept expanding through what I did, you know. And I went to Princeton, which is, you know, it's a great school, but at that time, you know, I didn't go into music. I didn't find what resonated with my heart there. So I ended up doing something completely different. I went into photography because of the teachers and the people who were in that program, because I loved images. And I thought, well, it's better to find the people that you love. You know, yesterday I was actually at an assisted living residence here near where I live, and I play in assisted living residences a lot. So you're talking about being with people who are 80, 90, even in their hundreds sometimes. Mm-hmm. And this woman came up to me, and I have no idea how old she was, but she was from Texas originally, which is a little unusual for where I live. So she had this very strong Texas accent still. And she came up to improvise with me at the piano to do one of these duets that I was describing before. And she came up in her walker, and she just had the most beautiful smile on her face. And she said, you know, I'm 1,000,000 years old, and I have friends. And there's nothing like having friends. So you see, those human relationships, she said that with all her heart. And then she sat down next to me at the piano, and she said, I love sitting here with you. So wherever we find that resonance, you know, that human resonance is the most beautiful thing. And I think that the content of it is far less important than the actual fact of that kind of resonance, because that's the deeper part of who we are. And we often, you know, are only partially aware of it, but we can feel it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I was just thinking about the resonance also when you are doing music together with whoever who has the heart open, then it's going into a state of bliss almost, you know, because it is, you are sort of merging together with your hearts and with what you are able to do, even if it is in a normal setting, you know, it can be. But if you are only preoccupied with the music and do it right, that is, my experience was sometimes it was painful to, you know, and so stressful. Go ahead.
Yeah,
you wanted to say.
I am curious, Jessica, how did you come out of that Princeton experience and move in the direction that you have developed? Because there are certainly some shifts, some life changes, some surprises probably in your life that prompted movement in the direction that you have gone.
And the courage, where did you get the courage from?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, you don't always feel very courageous, but also life, you know, you also don't feel particularly necessarily in control. I mean, I don't know if this is your experience, but life unfolds one thing to the next, and you think you're in control, but I mean, things are, you know, and then you look back and you have the benefit of hindsight, and you look and think, oh my gosh, look at how one thing unfolded to the next thing, to the next thing. I didn't really plan that. But after college, I ended up in Australia, and my mother, you know, the queen of pestering, said, you know, if you went any further, you'd be coming back. And that was, in a certain sense, the point. So I got like way the heck out and started a whole new life in Australia at the age of 23. And I began teaching there. So I had some wonderful students, and I also had a kind of freedom. I mean, I love the country. My husband's Australian, bless his heart, and I've actually been married to 3 different Australians in sequence, and he's the final one. So I do feel blessed that finally I found the right Australian, and I am an Australian resident as a result. But when I told my dad, just some people know this story because I tell it while I'm playing Waltzing Matilda on the piano in my concerts. And I said to my dad when I was going to get married to Lori, I said, I'm getting married and you'll never guess, are you sitting down? He's an Australian again. And he said, oh my gosh, Jess. And my father's a beautiful man. He's a philosopher. So you see, he doesn't respond to these kinds of things the way somebody else might who's a father. He just said, at this point, I think you should get compensation from the Australian government. And, and it was his way of he just let me be as I am, which is a beautiful thing. It's sometimes the greatest gift one human being can give another. So anyway, I lived there for several years in Melbourne, and I was teaching. And then ultimately I came back and I continued teaching piano. I was teaching photography over there as well. And then I came back and I was teaching at Middlebury College, which I enjoyed very much. So all of this kind of developed over time. But there were certain pivotal moments. There's no question about it in what I do. And now it's really focused on performing. Now my performances, what we're describing happens in the context of a performance for the people who are there. And that's in a huge gamut of environments. I mean, from places of worship to businesses to community centers to nursing homes and Alzheimer's units, schools. I mean, it's a very wide array.
This is wonderful because I think a little bit classical music, it's gotten stuck in these big concert halls and with the people wearing their newest dress and showing their newest how do you say, bracelets and things like that. And you are bringing down music down into life. This is really...
Yes. And it's great what you're saying, Heidi, because I really don't see any distinction in a certain way. We're, human beings are human, and there is a universality to what I perceive. I don't find myself as aware of the context or the setting as just the fact that when people respond to music really from their deepest place in themselves, it's singular, and it transcends whatever the specifics are of the place or of their age or of their background or whatever. So they could be Republican in this country or Democrat, and that's a big deal, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
No, it matters not at all.
No, because it's a completely different level of being. Where music touches the soul.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a how can I say, the substance, the essence. And what is the nice thing with music, at least I find it, I mean, singers have also words, but normally music doesn't need so much words. It's just, it's international.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a beautiful thing. I mean, that's what gives me hope, is that fact. It transcends time, place, culture, age, gender, the presence of any quote-unquote disability or lack thereof, the background of education or lack thereof. So this is what really gives me hope, is that it does not seem to me to be really touched by those otherwise surface qualities.
Absolutely. Do you want to say something?
Well, you're mentioning how universal this is. I'm wondering, obviously you perform in the U.S., and I'm sure you perform in Australia. Have you been to other places, other parts of the world, and is the experience of performing, creating these duets with other people, does it change from culture to culture, nation to nation?
Well, I had this beautiful experience. In actual fact, it was over Skype with children, impoverished children in Bogota, Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very special connection with South America because the woman about whom I wrote my book is from Ecuador. And she came into my life when I was 8. So when I was working with these children, I felt very strongly the sense of their little beings. Because the woman who raised me was herself orphaned as a child in the 1930s in Ecuador, and by the grace of God survived. And by even greater miracles found her way to me and became my nanny when I was 8, and essentially played an enormous role in raising me. So all of this comes out in what I write about in my book, and all of what I write about in my book, I mean, a lot of what I know about her was revealed to me relatively recently. But the first line of the book is, it took me 45 years to realize that I'd been raised by a saint. And as I look back, there were signs along the way. So when I see these children over Skype, and actually my husband Lawrence and I are going to be going down to Bogota in February to work with these children in person, which is a great excitement for us. But I worked with them in 2011 over Skype, and I would see them and they would speak with me. And back then, it was even more difficult. This is actually, you know, things have improved technologically since then. So, and of course, they're in South America, but nonetheless, they would share their stories with me, and they would sometimes play music. We couldn't do duets because of the limitation of the bandwidth and so on, and the yes, you know.
Yeah.
So, but they would share some of their stories with me, and then I would, in turn, this was the aspect of the duet, is that then I would create these little pieces spontaneously on the piano that, for me, when I heard their stories, this is what came to me, these melodies came to me, or this feeling in the music came to me, and I would create these little personal melodies and pieces for them as we were in discussion on Skype. And it was just enormously touching. And the way that I saw them respond to the music and the way that they shared their stories, there was no separation between us at all. It mattered not that they came from such a different culture to my own, or that I had been raised in this middle-class environment in the suburb of New York, and here they were coming from the slums of Bogota, Colombia. We met in a place that was really completely free of whatever those distinctions are. It's so beautiful.
What you are saying leads me to the insight, let's say, that what we are doing with children in school, teaching them music, is completely wrong. Because they have to sing, stand up, sing, or whatever, you know, play an instrument, learn the notes, and the joy and the power of music is almost never explored. You know, you must have a certain degree of learnedness, even if you go to a choir. You know, I have met so many people who said they were expulsed from the choir. They were said in childhood, you are stonato in Italian, it means out of tune. And so they never try to sing anymore because they say, oh, I cannot sing, I have no voice. And so we systematically in the education take out the deep connection with the music out of the people, or we make it impossible. What is your idea about that?
Yeah, the word that came to my mind is stillborn. So, you know, when a child is born, but is not alive when it's born, that was just the word that came to my mind in what you were describing, Heidi, because you see, there's every promise in the music that the children are learning and their exposure to the music. And if only that could be combined with this freedom to recognize each of those children as individuals in the process of their music making, then they would come away entirely empowered by their experience. That would be, that's a very incredible thing.
That would mean that we allow children to play music as they want it and not as we want it, you know. Then when they play the...
You raise very interesting questions, because there's a kind of paradox in the whole thing, or sort of a complexity, you could say. I mean, I studied piano for many years and I was classically trained. That allows me to sit with somebody and be able to free them through their own innate music making. So now the question is, how can we move forward from here? You know, what kind of system, you could say, what kind of experience can we offer people, practically, theoretically, and so on, you know, musically, that will give them a kind of ground that they only find in a limited way through what you're describing. So that's really the question. That's the question.
This is true, but I think we need some more skills to guide the curiosity and the joy of a child to just bang somewhere or go on the piano and do it, and slowly guide them instead of saying, no, this is wrong, you have to do it in this way. And if they then discover the beauty and somebody like you is playing wonderfully and they want to do it too, so I'm sure they would learn it the more, let's say, structured way of learning music. They would have the desire to learn it at a certain moment when they can.
Yeah.
But when they are confined of first having to do da 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 da, I mean, whoever wants to do that, and the children even less.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it reminds me of one of the most memorable experiences that I had, and this was actually at a workshop that I did at an integral conference in Monterey, California, a few years ago. So there's I was working with children and adults, and a 2.5-year-old boy came. This actually, the video of this is actually on YouTube. So this boy came up to me, 2.5 years old, completely kinetic, meaning energetic. Okay, so kids fall along the spectrum of energy. When they go to school, the ones who have sort of, they're more easily contained, these become more favored often because the teacher doesn't have to struggle with them. Mm-hmm. Kids who are less easily contained, and I don't buy this whole thing about ADHD and all of this. I mean, I think that, you know, we have to look at that completely differently. And I haven't really gotten into it, but it really makes me question, you know, and the drug use and all of that around it is just, I think it's horrible, to be honest. But anyhow, so anyway, this kid is 2.5 years old, completely energetic. All right. His parents are Rob and Tiffany Smith. So Rob is very involved in many of the, you know, since we were talking about this whole movement around the integral movement and so on. And so anyway, his son, so their son is 2.5. He comes up to me at the piano. But for him, it was much more interesting to be running around, all right? So I was sitting at the piano and he's running around, and then he'll sit down for a little bit and then he'll go run around again. It's all on YouTube, you can see it. His name is Sevyn, S-E-V-Y-N, it's a beautiful name. Mm-hmm. So finally, so what I did was I just played the energy, his energy on the keyboard. I just played his energy, I was playing his energy. So finally, you see, nobody was trying to contain him. His energy was what it was. And I was just mirroring that. So he sits down at a certain point, and he's 2.5, so his feet can't touch the ground. He's there, you know, next to me. He's about half my size. He's sitting down. He sits down finally after running and running. And he puts his hands on the keyboard, and I say, okay, you ready? Perfect rhythm. The two of us go into a spontaneous duet that is absolutely, completely perfect, in sync. And then I say to him, okay, now we're going to get quieter, you know, because in music, dynamics are a huge, you know, aspect. So, and I said, okay, we're going to get quieter together. And he's right on it. I mean, it was striking. It was really striking. He's like, and we're completely together. There's no difference in our ages at that point. Okay, we're completely together. And then I said, okay, now we're going to play more energetically. Now we're going to play forte, you know, loud. And he's right in there. And the whole thing ends. I don't know if I should give this away because I think people should go watch this. It's so unbelievable.
We will.
The whole thing ends with him sneezing. And that was it. That was the finale, you know? So you see, we're not in control of all this stuff. But the thing is that if you can appreciate a person for who they are, right? Mm-hmm. Then the sky's the limit. And he played with a kind of control, you could say, you know, when you're talking about control and all of that, it was in him already. Yeah. So these are the remarkable things that I've witnessed.
What you are describing is a session of music therapy. Yeah, you have done that with him. Yeah. This is, and the music we can, that was a little bit what I meant before, we can guide people. You said now forte or now piano. It's exactly in the right moment, and then people can follow it, even if they're only 2.5 years old. And as you said with the HDDP, I never know what it is, deficit, attention deficit disorder.
ADHD.
Yeah, okay. I also think that with music and the right kind of music and the right kind of meeting the person can do really wonder to the people.
You know, Heidi, I wanted to say something because I don't want to forget this, because what you're saying is so good. If you put a child into a situation, or any human being into a situation where they have no opportunity to express who they truly are, to actually come forth with their unique story, you can't hold them responsible for their asocial behavior. Really. Yeah. Or their lack of ability to learn or whatever, you see. Because they're being confined, you know, unreasonably. And I mean, there are, you know, of course, you know, there have to be parameters just functionally to help to create an experience, you know, a sort of cohesive experience, but it has to be done with such a kind of consciousness.
Absolutely.
So we're taking all of this stuff, all of this reactivity completely out of context, and we're not questioning why it might be happening, I think.
No, but it happens. Yeah. And I think this is the skillful person who is the guide or the facilitator. If we really can tune into the people who, let's say, have a problem, they don't necessarily need to have a problem, but the people with a problem, we can guide them out to a certain degree of a problem, and people who don't have a problem, we can guide them to their own soul, into their own creativity, to their own expression. But it's always theirs and not ours saying, you have to do that. You know.
Well, you used the therapy word here a couple of minutes ago, and I said, oh, well, of course it's therapy. But then I thought to myself, well, that is a terribly limiting concept too, you know, because it's just music underneath it all, you know?
Yeah, it has therapeutic possibilities.
Yeah, that's a byproduct, but, you know, in some cases a necessary ingredient too.
Right. Yeah, it throws a lot up into question. You're absolutely right. And even this notion of, you know, I kind of, you know, I was just thinking about it as you were talking, each of you, that there's a very important distinction, I think. We tend to label people by what they do. So if they're violent, then we say that's a violent person. That's a person with this, that, or the other thing. You see, so we become, we delineate or define their identity in ways that are not reflective of this deeper level of who they actually are. So there's huge problems in the world. This is the human condition. Mm-hmm. Huge problems in the world. Enormous suffering, enormous violence, enormous. Okay. It takes a huge heart to begin to, as even though I'm saying it to you, you know, I don't even let that in as a constant sort of reminder to myself. Mm-hmm. There's the thing that gives me hope, though, is to realize that an individual is never too far gone. So, you see, they may injure themselves and others a lot. But the soul is on, you see, the soul is there. I feel, you know. I remember when I was in Australia, this is another extraordinary experience that I had. I was actually just kind of spur of the moment, I was brought into a detention center for teens in the suburb of Sydney. Okay. And the children there, well, they were generally between the ages of like 11 and 20, mm-hmm. were there to be protected from themselves and from others who had been in their lives who may cause them harm. So mm-hmm. this was a place where they were supervised, and also it was a protective environment. So, you know, I came in and they had this beat up old upright piano sitting in a closet with accordion doors. And they opened these doors in this sort of recreational room. And the piano sounded like it hadn't been tuned in a very, very long time, but it didn't really, thank God it was there, you know. So I sat down with a girl who was probably 16. And when you look at somebody's face who has been through a lot, you can see it in their face, okay? There's something completely heartbreaking about it. God knows what she'd been through. God knows what she'd done to herself. God knows anything, all right? But she was there for a good reason. I'm sure they didn't just put her there. And she also looked like she had suffered physically in some way. So she sat down at the keyboard with me, and I said, so this was several years ago, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I asked her, do you have a favorite song? And she said, Hallelujah, you know, Hallelujah, which at that time was being heard everywhere. It was when that Leonard Cohen song had just been redone by Rufus Wainwright. I mean, this is just the technical part of, you know, this is what he did. He brought that song back to people, and suddenly everybody realized, oh my gosh, this is an incredible piece of music. So she had heard it, and she said, I love that song. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is fantastic, because it's actually an easy song to play on the keyboard. So I started to play it, and she just began, and I said, just play on the white notes, because this is the instruction that this is the only instruction I give to somebody, is just play on the white notes. So she started to play as I was playing the chords to Hallelujah, and she heard the music and the feeling and her love of the sound of those chords and of that rolling, those arpeggios, which are where those notes one after the other are rolling. And she was sitting there, and she began to play and touch the piano, and her notes began to just come out through her fingers, these long fingers. And I could see something change. And she began to realize that there was this place in her that was where this music was coming from. And she said, I can play. I can play. And she turned to the other girls and she said, look, I can play. In front of my eyes, this damaged 16-year-old girl transformed, her face transformed from all of this pain that I had seen into the face of a child. And she looked like she was young again. She was actually who she really was. And she was completely innocent. She had regained her innocence. And she turned and said, look, I can play. I will never forget it. These are the moments that give me faith in what's possible. I've seen it in my in front of me.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's very touching.
Yeah.
What you can do with music.
It leaves me kind of speechless when I hear stories like this. There's nothing to say. There's just to experience how that feels.
And you have brought us into a different state of consciousness by your story. Thank you. It's very
Thank
sweet.
you for allowing me to share it. I mean, it's very meaningful to me to be able to share it.
You know, and this is why life is worth living. We can lit a little light in people's lives who have not had much light before. So
yeah,
it's great.
Yeah.
You must feel very satisfied from the work that you do.
I love it, Mark. These moments, even just being able to recall the moments with you, you know, are wonderful. Like,
It's wonderful. And this convinces me ever more to find a way, even with my singing. You know, I have left the normal teaching, and I have left teaching altogether because I mainly found students who want to learn a song and want to sing right. And for me, it was not that. So maybe I find a different way to do that. And you're
in a different space. I can hear it.
I
in
am
your
in
voice.
a different space.
Yes.
I'm in my voice.
you know, one of the
And
things
we didn't even hear any music.
Well, one of the
Pardon?
things that I love doing is I actually work with people over Skype from different parts of the world. And recently I was working with someone, and it was on the piano. It could be on anything. But you know, when you said that, Heidi, it was so beautiful because I was just imagining you're singing and you're allowing yourself to regain the original sense of your love of your voice and of the feeling of creating those notes. You see, quietly and secretly, every pianist, they will never admit it, is jealous of singers.
And I'm jealous of pianists who succeed to put together all these fingers. I tried it for a while, but I didn't come too very far with it.
Yeah. But see, your body, your instrument, your throat, your voice, your instrument is wholly embodied inside of you, which is just amazing. So
and exactly, it should be. And what I'm teaching and what I try to convey is really to feel your voice in your body and use the whole body instead of creating an artificial voice. And often we have created an artificial voice in childhood by imitating other people. So for me, learning to have a good voice means learning to know yourself, your body and your psyche and whatever it is, you know. So you are right, because the voice is the first instrument. It's the instrument which we are born with. The first moment after birth, this is the voice.
That's right.
Yeah. And you know, and the good news is, I mean, with piano, when you want to do the work you do, you really have to know to play it. I couldn't do it. But with voice, everybody has the capacity to, you know, to emanate sounds and to even to sing, when you understand singing as not as singing certain songs, but just as a singing some sounds in a certain melody, in a certain rhythm, and what this is singing, you know. And in some way, even talking like I talk now, in some way, this is singing too, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. You know, in the book that I wrote, one of the things that I describe is my earliest musical inspiration. And when I was young, there was a moment where I was sitting out on the front lawn in a suburb of New York City, and it was garbage collection day. And this is back in the early 1970s, so 1971. So I'm 12. And the garbage truck approached, and I began to hear a melody as the men stepped off to collect the garbage. And the chords and the music that I was hearing so totally captivated me that I followed, because I realized it was coming from a little transistor radio that was hanging off the belt. So we're all old enough to know what that is, a transistor radio. It's like, these were the early versions of an iPod. And it was hanging off the belt of one of the garbage men. So I followed him all the way up the street, because I couldn't let go of the sound of that music. And when it was done, I ran back to the house and to the piano, and I tried to find those chords. It was like I couldn't let go of the feeling of those chords, of that sound. So I tried to find them on the piano. Those chords have entered into, and they sort of inspired and catalyzed all of my improvising and music making and so on and so forth. And I later discovered that the song was James Taylor's Fire and Rain. And in actual fact, I'm actually going to be going and performing in a couple of weeks at the place where he wrote that song. So you never know how life is going to come full circle. He's also supported my work, which is a beautiful thing. He and his wife have supported my work with the women with disabilities. So you see, I never would have imagined that. And but I think I was compelled to think about that, Heidi, because it was the love of the music that made me continue and explore. And I think as you're singing, it's your love of music, you know, your love of the feeling of the sound of certain harmony, you know, certain sequences of notes that you're singing that can really move you.
Yeah. We have here Jessica. I think this is a good way to close, because we're very near the end. Here is Andrea Spinelli, and he gives us what I think is the text to the music, to Hallelujah. You probably know that better than me, because I'm not sure if I know that. He said, "Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing." That's Hallelujah. Thank you, Andrea. Wonderful.
Well, we've been talking about music, and that's the closest we've gotten to any actual music on the show today. And, you know, I hope that we can end up by directing people to some places where we can,
we have several announcements to do. First is the one here on our lower third, the bit.ly link with WF, big letters, then what is this? A hyphen. Book This is our new iBook, which we have created out of past shows. And please go there and get it. So you can help us and support us a little bit to create these things. It's not expensive, but it would help us a little bit to do all this volunteer work which we are doing. This is one thing. The next thing is in 15 minutes, about 15 minutes, we have a blab where you can jump in and talk with us and with Jessica. Just talk whatever you want to know, ask questions, and tell us your story. And you find the link lower in the how do you call it? Event page. Event page. But if you go in about 20 minutes over to blab.im and you look on the live events, or it says on air, I think, and you scroll down, you will find us there. And
what do they look for? Blab.im.
Or I am.
In English, I am.
In English, I am. In German and Italian, I am. Okay, because Andrea is Italian.
So it's B-L-A-B as in boy.
B-L-A-B. Blah 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 blah. Because it's mirroring the chatting, and then dot I am. But I sent you the link, and it's also in the event page, and I will post it again as soon as we have closed down. And for you, Jessica, do you want to repeat where people can find you, and maybe also say what you are going to do next?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm interested in, I love when people contact me and share with me their stories. In fact, I think my next book is going to be about the stories that people tell me. My book, In Duet with God, as you mentioned, is on induetwithgod.com. And even some of the stories that I'm hearing now, I'm putting onto the blog on that site. And then Piano Beautiful is my music website. And people can contact me through pianobeautiful.com or induetwithgod.com, and I welcome the opportunity to perform in communities throughout the U.S. and overseas, and in Europe and Australia and other places, and would love to, I'm happy to receive inquiries about that.
Wonderful. And now we are hoping that technology goes better and better, and then we can do the duet online.
Right. Have music.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Jessica, and see you in 15 to 20 minutes there.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.